Time once again for second helping. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, alongside my great friend and co-host, Brent Beaird, longtime college football analyst for First Coast News down in Jacksonville, Florida. Brent, of course, also a voter for the most prestigious individual honor in collegiate athletics, the Heisman Trophy. Brent, we've got plenty of spring football to talk about, but as you might expect, especially after late night in LA on Thursday night, the Alabama Crimson Tide taking down historic UNC. What a thrilling game that was out in Los Angeles. Crimson Tide advances to its second Elite Eight in program history. And you still got the Tennessee Vols around.
Right.
Tennessee set on this
Yes.
Friday to take on the Creighton Blue Jays. If you like retro basketball, I think Creighton, Tennessee might
Yes.
be the game for you. But the possibility, after all is said and done, after all the early round disappointment, for two SEC teams to land in the Elite Eight.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive, is it not? And this may be the finally the year for Rick Barnes, Trav, to where they don't have to rely totally on their defense. This has been a team that's been mystifying. Tennessee has in the postseason. They obviously play really good defense. Haven't been able to score, and that's been a problem. Their fans have been certainly dismayed about that. But this may be the year, right? Well, with Dalton Connect, to where he may be the missing piece that they've been looking for in order to kind of get over the hump here. And boy, oh boy, if they do, and we may be looking at going into the weekend, something that would have been unheard of, maybe two possible teams, at least in the Elite Eight, Travis, if not the Final Four.
Yeah, it would seem as if Purdue would be a good bet to be in the way of Tennessee and
Yes.
that Final Four if Tennessee is able to get past the Blue Jays on Friday night. Zach Edey, very good Purdue team, would still be out there on the horizon in Detroit for Rick Barnes to navigate. But you said it, having that star player, having that player late in games that you can turn to, like a Dalton Connect. I think there's also others for Tennessee too, though. Zakai Ziegler, he sort of has that hero attribute about him, big moments. You kind of expect him to be able to step forward as well. And you saw it with Alabama. I mean, Mark Sears is clearly Alabama's go-to guy. And Sears had a solid night, had a good night against North Carolina. But it also comes down to these other guys. I mean, Grant Nelson with just a performance for all time in the win over North Carolina, 24 points, 12 rebounds, 5 blocks. And we went into that game talking about Armando Bacot, the big for North Carolina, who seemingly has been around since the Dean Smith days in Chapel Hill. But, Alabama got it from other guys, Ryland Griffin, Aaron Estrada, just an impressive performance. And then defensively in the second half, Alabama really stepped it up. RJ Davis, you went into that game thinking this is a guy who can go for 25 plus like a Mark Sears. And he got his points for the most part, but he did it on 20 shots from the field. So it wasn't an efficient outing for RJ. And boy, a finish. Alabama, it looked like after a timeout by North Carolina with about 5 minutes to go or so, and Alabama was up 5 at the time, had hit Carolina with a real surge led by Grant Nelson. The Tar Heels, as you would expect, given the program that they are, answered emphatically. And then you're thinking, boy, does Alabama have another punch in it? And yeah, I'd say Grant Nelson and his teammates certainly did.
The funny thing about Nelson is he stepped up 24 points, 12 rebounds, 5 blocks, a steal, and assist. But Travis, the reality is against Clemson, would it surprise us also if Grant Nelson went back to scoring 6 points? That's what you really don't know about Nelson and oftentimes about this team. But look, the thing that really stands out to me in the second half, Bama held North Carolina 10 of 40, Travis, 2 of 16 from 3. And Baycock and Davis, as you mentioned, a combined 6 of 21. And look, the amazing thing is Ryland Griffin, who earlier this year probably couldn't guard a lamppost actually asked to move from Davis to Ryan after Ryan got hot, the Notre Dame transfer. And Nate Oates said that Griffin was adamant about it and he wasn't going to take no. So look, and something you said a few weeks, maybe even a few months ago, is if Bama ever learns how to play defense, they could be dangerous. And Trav, at this point, that's true.
Yeah, I gave up 54 points in the first half Thursday night. So you were thinking, here's that Alabama defense. But strong performance, no doubt, there in the second half. Carolina made 10 threes in the first half. As you said, just 2 in the second half. I thought also Alabama did a better job of taking care of the basketball. Too often in the first half, empty trips. And Alabama wasn't getting shots up. Turned it over 7 times, I believe. Second half, turned it over just 3 times, battled on the glass. It isn't always pretty with a guy like Nick Pringle, but stayed out of foul trouble. And for Grant Nelson, that was big too. And I thought also when Armando Bacot picked up his third in the second half, maybe Hubert Davis a little bit too by the book in how he subbed out Bacot there. And that seemed to open some things up for Alabama once he went off the floor. And so, a couple different ways to look at this, but it is just like we all expected, right? In that West Regional final, Alabama and Clemson. And that's actually a rematch from late November. Clemson went into Tuscaloosa and knocked off Alabama by 8. So some familiarity certainly going to be in play come Saturday night out at crypto.com arena.
Travis, one thing that I'm curious if you thought about, and I bet you did, Grant Nelson could have went from the hero to the GOAT in about 1 or less than 1 second. He missed the 2 free throws. And then now he blocked the heave. But did it go through your mind that if Nelson is a little closer in proximity, would there have been a foul called on him? And North Carolina's at the line with 3 free throws to win the game. That scenario went through my mind look, we say football is a game of inches, so is basketball, really.
Yeah, you don't like to see him miss the 2 when he could have iced the game with 0.9 left. But once he missed the first, I was of the belief that he should just miss the second because, a 3 can beat you, but it's going to be a 75 to 80 foot shot. So the last thing you want to do in that situation is get yourself anywhere close to a foul. And he really wasn't. He was still off, and he made a nice play to render the potential scenario moot. But he was a hero, no doubt, though. Really down the stretch of that game. If you thought he was essentially going to outplay Bacot, who wasn't terrible. I think Bacot had 19 and 12.
Right.
But the Crimson Tide, again, not just from Nelson, Estrada, also Ryland Griffin, I think knocked down 5 threes in the game. A little bit of a different approach from North Carolina than what we saw from, say, Grand Canyon in the second round, and that Carolina will give you room on the offensive end. By Carolina standards, a better defensive team than we've seen of late. But if you're Hubert Davis, I think you're in retrospect thinking, we didn't close out on some of these guys. Alabama, the same thing. Cormac Ryan got hot from 3.
He did.
And Alabama simply just wasn't closing out hard enough for him. But there goes the Crimson Tide on to its second Elite 8 in program history, trying to make its first Final 4 in program history. The draw has laid out pretty nicely for this team, and it should be a styles make fights situation on Saturday night because Clemson does not want to get in a track meet. Very, very tough to guard and defend in the half court. And then they'll also get after you defensively. So probably going to be a styles game more along the lines of what we saw in round 2 for Alabama than, say, Carolina or certainly Charleston in the opening round. What about Tennessee tonight? Creighton to me is kind of like Clemson.
Yes.
The way they play and the way that they can really hurt you with some different things. But stylistically, this looks like a game that Rick Barnes' teams are made to take advantage of.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have complete confidence in Rick Barnes' teams playing defense. I think they can man up. I think they've got the size. I think this is one of the more complete Tennessee teams that we've seen in a while, with the offensive part of it that we mentioned a few minutes ago too, and so it's going to be fun to be able to watch and see what they do. But again, no Kentucky going into the Final Four.
Cal's coming back.
That's right, but he is coming. That's exactly right. With that, and I don't think even the buyout was the deal here, frankly, Travis. But I think there were some circumstances at Kentucky, and I'll be brief about this. They're refurbishing the stadium for football. They just hired a woman's basketball coach, and they had some good one, absolutely.
Brooks out of Virginia Tech. That's a good hire.
It is. They've got some expenses that I really think, Travis, that Mitch Barnhart thought long and hard about. That would it be less painful to bring Cal back one more year and deal with it until we can get on our feet better with our economics?
Yeah, there's no doubt an adaptation that is taking place across collegiate athletics. And if you think it simply involves the have-nots, it doesn't. Now, places like Kentucky, SC, Alabama, yeah, they can go to that well, but it's still, because it's ever changing, you're not exactly sure what you're trying to build right now, or what you're going to be allowed to build, big picture wise, once we kind of get through this period here of adaptation and adjustment. But interesting times, no doubt, up in the Bluegrass State. Let's talk some spring football, Brent Beaird. And unfortunately, as a part of that backdrop, it seems like as we get 6, 7, 8 practices in, or in the case of Missouri, you go ahead and wrap it up before late March out in Como. Injuries, a part of that narrative, unfortunately. And I think we've seen it at a couple different places, off the field stuff in general involving the Georgia Bulldogs. But for Alabama, we'll start there. Jalen Hale, a very promising second-year receiver, goes down with what Kalen DeBoer described post-scrimmage Thursday as a significant knee injury. That's a shame, because I guess on the bright side, he's a young player. It happened in the spring. We'll see how he progresses throughout the offseason. But this is a guy that I really expected to take that next step for Alabama at wide receiver. He has all the attributes you look for in a true outside guy. He has the speed, he has the length, he has the catch radius, all those things, 50-50 ability to go up and get the ball. But it's a setback for him, no doubt, and the kind, again, that you just don't like to hear about in spring ball or anytime.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think they're fairly deep in that receiver room, and they'll be okay. But this is a guy there's no doubt they've been really waiting on him to kind of jump up and take the lead here. So that is quite unfortunate. But this Alabama offense is incredibly fascinating to hear about what has been going on. I mean, the quarterback room, Jalen Milroe obviously doing well. Question is Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, and even Dylan Lonigan as possibilities. Going to be able to run the ball, I think. Jameer Miller, Justice Haynes. Hearing a lot about the offensive line that's coming around. But it's just a different feel. And just because it's a different feel doesn't mean that that's a criticism toward the greatest coach of all time and Nick Saban. When you bring a guy in, it's just different. But in this NIL era, Travis, it's got to be, does it not? But I think there's enough variety on this offense. And that's going to be when the spring game comes around on the 13th. I think ESPN made a good decision as to which game they wanted to highlight. And I'm sure a lot of it will be fairly vanilla, but it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with this offense.
Yeah, DeBoer, after the scrimmage on Thursday, didn't get very specific when he was asked about some situations like the offensive line, or talked about those areas, say like offensive tackle, where it's a thrill a minute, it seems like, for
Yeah,
Alabama, because Caden
really.
Proctor transfers to Iowa. Now it looks like he's
Mhm.
transferring back to Alabama. So that would help alleviate some
Yeah,
concerns at one of those offensive tackle spots. But he defers more to say, well, the run game, we were physical in the
yeah,
scrimmage on Thursday, or our pass rush looked good, which I took to mean, yeah, it's still very much a work in
yes.
progress with JC Latham moving on and Caden Proctor not around this spring.
Yeah, but they got some real promise, I believe. I've heard great things about guys in the on the defensive side of the ball,
Yeah.
like Red Morgan, Xavier Brown, Malachi Moore. Obviously, is running that group back there, but Keon Sam, the Jackson kid too. I know that a lot of these you're pawning about Devonta Smith. So all kinds of potential and possibilities on that defensive side of the ball.
No doubt about that. And Kane Womack going to have a very interesting style of defense.
There
That
is.
swarm that he's implementing, that
Mhm.
4-2-5, and going to be a little more zone defense than probably what you're used to seeing from Alabama in the Nick Saban era. So different looks. And quarterback, as you alluded to earlier, that's always going to be a big situation with Jalen Milroe coming back. Austin Mack, the Washington transfer, can he push there
Yeah.
in the middle to upper areas of that depth chart? He is, I call him cell tower, because he is as tall as a
6'6".
cell tower, and
Mhm.
in the right offense, he's capable of giving you 5 Gs in passing yards.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's gonna be interesting to watch as well.
Mhm.
So, let's move around the Southeastern Conference, and understanding, that you're gonna have, even within spring practice, guys making decisions to move on. We're not even gonna get, in some areas, I guess, Brent, to the April window before decisions are being made, and I see that's happening right now at Auburn with the defensive back moving on.
Yeah, they've got JD Rhyme is no longer on the roster, 4-star, 2 years of eligibility remaining. Now, what is interesting, and I'm curious if you've heard the same thing, is that Peyton Thorne, the quarterback, has settled down and is kind of stepping into his own. Now, this is not a finished product, any stretch of the imagination. And I'm wondering how much of that is they've just got better receivers. The two cams, especially the freshman coming in, is supposed to be really lights out. And I think the offensive line is better. So, Trav, I'll qualify what I've heard from beat writers about Thorne with. I think he's got a better product around him.
I think he does. That's certainly the expectation. And you said it on the recruiting front with what Auburn was able to do at the wide receiver position. That's going to certainly be the expectation. So, Brent, when we think about places like Florida, Ole Miss, transfer portal activity, sounds like, at least early on, the returns are what maybe Ole Miss and Florida would have hoped, with an
Yeah.
emphasis probably more so on the defensive side of the ball at both places.
Yeah, and one of the more amusing aspects of this that involves, and you called it, Florida and Ole Miss, Princely U, as they like to call them at Florida, whose name is that would get me tongue tied. Manilin is going from Florida to Ole Miss, was very critical of Florida. And as you can imagine, a lot of the Florida beat writers, Trav, have shown a lot of clips over the last few days on Twitter showing Princely U giving, shall we say, less than a mammoth effort at trying to tackle ball carriers or wide receivers. So that situation has been a little bit amusing too. Unfortunately, you mentioned injuries a minute ago. I'll throw this in here. Miles Graham, a freshman linebacker at Florida, had a back procedure, so he's out for a while. And Trav, to show you how all of us are getting older, Graham is the son of Ernest Graham,
Yeah.
who made quite an impact in the Gator backfield a few years ago.
Yeah, I think getting Grimsley out of the portal from Alabama could be
Yes.
very big. Alabama, the previous staff especially, loved him. Alabama, very deep in this latest recruiting class where the secondary is concerned. So I always wondered if Grimsley, even before he signed with Alabama, might ultimately switch to the Florida Gators, the home
Mhm.
state Florida Gators, and kind of worked out that way in the end. I would expect him to make a pretty significant impact quickly for Billy Napier's team. What about LSU? We talk about defense in the Southeastern Conference and the commitment that LSU and Brian Kelly made on that side of the ball from a staff perspective. We have outlined it here. It is undeniable. But
Yes.
then I think about how ineffective they were with some guys who are probably going to have their names called
Yeah.
fairly early
Really.
in the upcoming NFL draft. I'm thinking about Mason Smith probably in that regard, but and even with Harold Perkins on that defense. Now, good to have him back, no doubt
Yeah.
about it. But when I think about LSU and personnel, at least right now, especially in that front seven, I guess linebacker depth, experienced guys coming back at those positions, but always interested in the defensive line at LSU because they've had so many greats. You bring Bo Davis back in now,
Yes.
the LSU alum, a great defensive line coach. So I got to think the hopes are high. Got to be higher than what it was for last year.
Well, and I think another guy's going to help him, Gio Paez from Wisconsin. He's defensive end that is going to transfer. That was announced a few days ago. Trev, he has spent 5 seasons, 5 seasons with Wisconsin, has 1 year of eligibility remaining. So you talk about some experience, but he certainly has got it. Look, and as usual, we say this every year, they've got dudes on that roster every year. I mean, at safety, Jordan Gilbert, Major Burns, Sage Ryan, in the secondary, Ashton Stamps, Jerry Brown, J.K. Johnson. Those are all names that we're familiar with who are indeed coming back. But this is where they've got to go. They know that they've got guys like Kyrie Lacey, who has been an acrobat at practice, from what we understand, with some of the catches. But having Blake Baker coming from Missouri, Corey Raymond from Florida, Bo Davis, as you mentioned, I give Kelly a lot of credit, Trav. He knows where they're weak right now, and he knows that's the direction they've got to go.
Speaking of defensive line, some pretty strong comments coming out of Rocky Top, where that coaching staff is concerned,
Oh,
in that
yeah.
Tennessee will have the best defensive line in the country in
Yeah.
2024. Fill me in on that, Brent.
Yeah. Tim Banks, the defensive coordinator, must have been having a real positive day that day, Trav, and said just what you mentioned. Now, Rodney Gardner, who has been around for a little bit in the SEC, has he not, pal? He comes back and says, well, I think we need to be a little careful about that. Now, look, there's no doubt they've got talent. James Pierce Jr. is a kid you mentioned before, who has shown a lot of promise, frankly. So I think they're kind of excited, obviously, where they want to go. Nico Lamaliva is getting all the accolades, but you and I both know, like LSU, if they're going to take the next step in this league, their defense has got to be a complement to Heupel's offense.
It does. And really, with that offense and what the expectations will continue to be on that side of the ball, it's not like you have to be top 10 defensively
Yeah,
in
right.
college football to fit what they need with that program. It's about to be this gauntlet, too, as spring games, right?
Yes.
When we get to April 6th, April 13th, April 20th. And the thing I catch myself with, Brent, and have to keep reminding myself is you need to include Oklahoma and Texas in
Yep.
this deal. And
No
both
doubt.
those teams are going to have their spring games on April the 20th. And I guess for different reasons, it sounds like both are very excited about their quarterback situations. You look at
Yes.
Texas, it's pretty evident with Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning and the guys that they have, especially atop that depth chart. And then you look over at Oklahoma and you think, well, Dylan Gabriel leaves for Oregon,
Mm-hmm.
but that may have been a precursor of what was to come anyway, with Jackson Arnold stepping in there behind center. And even with a defensive minded head coach and Brent Venables at Oklahoma, it feels like the narrative continues to be for the Sooners have to continue to improve on that side of the football. I know they like their linebacker depth, Danny Stutzman coming back at that position. But when I think about SEC quality personnel, I look first and foremost and have for years at the front seven with
Yes.
an emphasis on that
Yes.
defensive line. And we'll see if the Sooners can make those strides. And the same question for Texas, because they're losing some key pieces up front on that defensive line. I gotta think Bo Davis, before leaving to LSU, had done a really good job
No
of
doubt.
development in terms of next guys up there. But there are questions, I think, for both those teams entering the SEC in terms of their viability. Texas seems to be recruiting at such an elite level and also doing a good job in NIL and the transfer portal that it's hard to imagine Sark having a gap in years in terms of the required talent to compete in this new SEC. And then you think about some of the programs like Arkansas, and we talk about Sam Pittman and
Mm-hmm.
his big picture situation. And it really underscores the question about what about Arkansas competing on a consistent basis, Mississippi State, South Carolina, Kentucky. Although I know, as you noted, Kentucky, and we talk defense, returning 10 starters. So with
Yeah.
Mark Stoops
Yeah.
overseeing that situation should be a good deal for the Wildcats.
Yeah, and they've got to get more consistent, frankly, on the offensive side of the ball, particularly with that offensive line. I think that's going to be huge for them. Just to hit on a couple of things that you mentioned, Trav, how attractive again is that a Texas game going to Michigan? I know Michigan loses a lot of guys, and by the way, Fox has decided the network they're going to show the Michigan and Ohio State spring games. I thought that was interesting. But at the same time, I'm looking forward to seeing what Stoops is going to do with this bunch. But also hearing this week from some Oklahoma beat writers who really think that for Venables, this is a crucial year. And the thing you pointed on is this guy is a defensive guy, and that's kind of where he got his reputation. And or the Sooners going to be better in that position. And one more thing that I think is going to be worth mentioning, and we're going to say this a lot coming up in April, is you listed the spring games. Well, Trav, the transfer portal opens back up mid-April. And again, there's an SEC rule that you cannot transfer within the conference. In the spring, you can in the winter, but that's going to be something we've got to keep our eye on because of some activity. All these schools need a position or two to see where they're going to go.
Yeah, something else we need to keep an eye on is this situation at the University of Georgia, and it seems to
Yes.
be one that won't leave the
Oh,
Bulldogs alone, and you could say due to their own actions. And I think a lot of people look at this latest vehicular issue for Trevor Etienne, the Florida transfer, who was cited last Sunday morning on 4 charges, including DUI and reckless driving. And this predates Kirby in Athens.
yeah.
And I don't know if Trevor just didn't get the memo, but Clark County, Athens, Clark County,
Yeah.
law enforcement, they do not play. And I guess you could say,
No.
well, look at so much of the other stuff that's been going on the roads involving Georgia players and staffers, tragically, horrifically, as we know, in the not too distant past. But how big of a deal is this, in your opinion, for Trevor and just the ongoing narrative with Georgia?
There'll be some, as Kirby said, Coach Kirby Smart, there'll be some internal punishment, which probably means that he'll miss the spring game. I don't think he'll miss the opener
That's
against
Clemson, right? Yeah.
Clemson in Atlanta. But look, you touched on this. This is a program-wide issue and they have got to get a handle on this. And I know NIL means fast cars and money and being out of control, but this is something that Georgia's had tragedy with before, and I know they're dealing with it, but they've got to be able to get a handle on this. A couple of quick things for Georgia in recruiting. I know one of them caught your eye particularly. Now, quarterback Jared Curtis and a Nashville Christian, #1 quarterback in the class of 26. He is committed, but what got my attention was Georgia doesn't get and keep everybody they want, like some people think. Trev, how about Justice Terry, defensive lineman, #2 rated in the nation, decides that that he is going to Southern Cal. So I thought that was interesting.
I got a text about that.
Yeah, I just bet that you did, and I have noticed because of the text that you got, how the Trojans. I know they're outside the league, but this bears repeating. The Trojans are making some hay within the southern part of the United States.
Well, SE revamped that defensive staff after last season. Lincoln addressed that, had to do it. And one of the new hires is Eric Henderson, defensive line coach. Previously, the defensive line coach for the LA Rams. And this guy can get after it on the recruiting trail. So I don't think it's a coincidence that you're seeing defensive line, edge, those kind of guys with the biggest star rankings jumping on board. And I'll tell you this too, SC has come to the understanding that NIL is important, and they are built for it, as you might expect at a place like Southern California. But a revamped staff, both in terms of the defensive side of the ball, also in terms of support staff, I think it's already made a big difference. But make no mistake about it, he who has the gold usually gets the 5 stars.
Right.
And SC, even with this sort of dearth in SEC and SC relative football, still has a lot of it. They've got a brand new facility coming online also in 2026. So they've got a lot to sell right now out in Los Angeles. So Brent, when we talk about important injuries here as we wind things down on the latest edition of Second Helping. Connor Weigman, that might be the most important recovery from an injury from last season in the Southeastern Conference. Had the left foot injury. It sounds like it's still an ongoing situation with him getting back fully.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's coming along. He's not doing much, obviously, during the spring, but they think that he will be okay along that time. I love what Elko is doing there, and I think that they are going to be very good this year. Now, they've got some guys coming back like Moose Muhammad, who Travis and I both really appreciate. Trav, Pops won't like this, but one of the former Gators, Jaden Hill, in the secondary is somebody they've been raving about so far. The coordinator Jay Bateman, that maybe a change of scenery has helped Jaden Hill a little bit.
It never can hurt. Sometimes, guys make those moves and ends up being a good thing for him. And you said it, I think at the wide receiver position, even with Aniyah Smith, I guess moving on, Evan Stewart moved on to Oregon, I believe. Muhammad, Noah Thomas, Jade Walker. There's some nice guys to work with there on the outside when Connor Weigman does in fact return. Hey, Brent, you got any other little nuggets or tidbits you want to throw at us before we get out of here?
Yeah, Luke Doty at South Carolina has shared that he is working at quarterback and wide receiver. So I think they'll be able to take advantage of.
Are they going to run like the single wing at SC this year? Because, you got Robbie Ashford that you can play at receiver and running back, and it's a single wing Gamecocks. It's going to be a Gamecock with just a single wing, not two.
Right. Trev, could there be a little wishbone work maybe in the off
for the
season?
Gamecocks. I like that.
Yeah, is a possibility. Still a lot of talk about Ole Miss having one of the better D lines. I give Lane a lot of credit for this. He made this a priority and bringing guys over like Walter Nolan and the
Speaking of
previously,
NIL, yeah.
yeah, in the previously mentioned Princely U from Florida is another thing that is along that line too. But Trav, before we get out of here, we need a pumps report, and the other thing would be, and certainly I give credit to the NCAA tournament. About every other commercial is a Masters commercial that's coming up in a few weeks. Trav, who's playing golf right now that you like as we near the Masters date?
It got to be Scotty Scheffler, man. I mean, he's on one. He's won 2 in a row on the PGA Tour, at least what's left of it, and is in good shape on this Friday out in Houston to perhaps make it 3 in a row. So
Yeah.
hard to go against Scotty Scheffler, but then you got the live guys that, regardless of what the purists, the PGA Tour loyalists, and I'm one of those people. I grew up on PGA Tour golf. I still love it, still watch it pretty consistently. John Rahm coming from live now. Those kind of guys are going to be very much in the mix. Dustin Johnson, a lot of capable options from live to think about as well. As for Pops, had the second cataract repaired. I need to check in on him actually. So we're hoping the first one went extremely well. The second one goes well. He'll have new vision, which could be dangerous. Pops with good vision could actually could be dangerous. So we're going to kind of hold our breath with that. But no, he's doing well. And I will say this about Lane Kiffin. He's a hard guy to take serious a lot of the time. But I'm with him on the transfer portal situation as far as a 1-year commitment being required. Because just like with this Caden Proctor situation, you can leave and then you can leave again right now. And with NIL and guys able to grab money here and then leave after 2 months, not even spend a season before making a move, that seems reasonable enough. That's level-headed Lane right there, I think.
It is. And Travis, I want to wish you and everybody else a happy Easter. And I tell you, one guy who's going to have a good Easter is Chris Smelley, the former South Carolina quarterback, went kayaking. Help me on this, on the Gulf of Mexico. He is a football coach at Sylacauga in Alabama. A lot of concern, a lot of prayers went up for him because he went missing, but he was found. I did want to say that. And Trav, that is good news. We did not need another tragedy this week.
No, God bless the Smellies. And you talk about a blessing, miracle, whatever you want to call it, because to be swept out in a kayak in the Gulf of Mexico in fading light on top of all that, so much credit to the Coast Guard and in making that happen and really presenting Chris and his family with the biggest blessing, biggest miracle you could perhaps fathom in a lot of ways. So well done, Brent. Absolutely. As we get out of here on this holiday weekend, Brent, look forward to doing it again real soon.
Me too, bud. Enjoyed it. Hoops and spring football. It's a great time of year.
It really, really is. For Brent Beaird, Travis Reier, thanking you for joining us right here on Second Helping, the show of choice for fans and followers of the #1 league in all of collegiate athletics, the Southeastern Conference. So long, everybody.